This is the Sony ZVE10, and this is the new Sony ZVE10 II. My goal for this video is to help you determine whether it's worth the extra money to get this new camera. I'm gonna be completely impartial in this. I'm not trying to convince you to get one or the other, just an objective comparison between these two cameras. This one's a better camera. I mean, of course it is. It's an upgraded version of the same camera. They're not gonna upgrade it with worse components. But the real question is whether it's better enough to justify the few extra $100 you have to spend to get it. Because this one exists, this one can now be found on eBay for about half the price. Physically, they're super similar. I'm gonna be terrible and just let these sensors rock raw. They're the same width, really close to the same height and weight. The ZVE10 II is like 20 grams heavier on the spec sheet, but in a blind lift test, I don't think you'd be able to tell which one's heavier. Unless maybe you're super weak, like a baby. The size difference that you do notice is definitely in the grip. It's hard to see it. It's hard to see it. It's hard to see it, but it's really easy to feel it. They've added some meat to the grip of the ZVE10 II. I'm gonna put this lens back on. The on-off switch has moved to the shutter button stack rather than being a switch on the top of the camera. And then the movie mode, picture mode, S&Q mode became a toggle switch rather than a button. It's still a tiny camera, but there is more to wrap your fingers around on this grip. And that's because they've moved away from the W battery, and now they're using the Z battery. The same battery that's in my Sony a7 IV. This is not an insignificant difference either. This battery has more than twice the capacity of this battery. 16.4 watt hours versus 7.3 watt hours. The new camera does use more power because of its new processor, but it doesn't use twice as much power. So the new ZVE10 II will last longer on the battery. However, both cameras can charge while they're in use. So with proper planning, the bigger battery doesn't have to be a deal breaker. I carry a purse now, never saw that in my future. One thing that's always in here is a battery bank to sip off of. And with one of these, both cameras can last an entire day. What's next? Let's get into picture quality. Something I find kind of interesting, the one place you can't really see any difference between these two cameras is in the final picture that comes out in the end. And maybe that's the only thing you need to hear to make your decision. If I've got the same lens on either camera, shooting with all the same settings in the same room at the same time, the end result is basically identical. In fact, in this very paragraph that you've just watched me say out loud, I switched back and forth between the ZVE10 and the ZVE10 II for each line. If you want a pixel peep, set this video to 4K. This right here is shot through the ZVE10. I'm shooting these next couple of shots back to back using the same lens in the same room under the same conditions. I guess the haze in the air could be slightly different because it will have settled, but otherwise only the camera is what I'm changing. Same settings and everything. You should be able to carefully inspect my beard stubble with impeccable precision. This picture is sharp. If you're curious, we're at 1/80 shutter speed, ISO 125, 50mm f1.4 at 24 frames per second. And now I'm shooting through the ZVE10 II. There really isn't any noticeable difference in the final product, especially after all of the reformatting that YouTube does to it after you upload. The sensor in this camera is a different sensor, so it's possible there's a little bit of color variation, I guess. I am going to do 0 color correction after either of these shots. This will come straight out of camera, shooting in HLG3 and then converting from an HDR to an SDR picture in Final Cut Pro. So if all that's true, then you might think, then why on earth would anyone get the new one that costs way more? What is this new camera able to do with a processor that is 8 times as fast? Because it doesn't make the 4K picture any different. The Bion's XR processor, the computer that's inside this camera, is 8 times faster than the computer that's inside this camera, the Bion's X. So even though it doesn't change the picture that comes out at the end, what it does allow for are some quality of life upgrades. In no particular order, here are some things that have become apparent to me that's different about this new camera. So I record through my monitor a lot. I do that so you can see all of this data on the screen when I'm trying to do something or show how something works. With the ZVE10, when you're shooting in 4K, the camera will not output all of the display info stuff through HDMI. So like, you can't make it show all of this. The shutter speed, the aperture, the white balance, all that stuff that's on the info screen is unavailable through HDMI with the ZVE10. When you're in 4K, it all works fine when you're shooting in 1080, but I always shoot in 4K. Put the camera in 1080p and poof, it all shows back up. I guess it takes just enough extra CPU processing that the older processor can't handle it while also super sampling that 4K. Because if you don't know, this camera, both of these cameras, actually shoot in something closer to 6K and then in real time take that 6K and chew it down to a 4K picture. That gives the cameras more data to work with, and theoretically you end up with a better 4K picture in the end. So the processor's already working pretty hard doing that. On the ZVE10 II, you can have the display output info through HDMI on any setting. Great, that's relatively niche and a lot of you won't care that it can do that. Next up, 4K at 60 frames per second. A lot of you do care that it can do that. This is also a CPU thing. Basically, the sensor that's in the ZVE10 is said to be the same sensor that was in the FX30, which can absolutely do 4K at 60 frames per second. It can even do 4K at 120. But this processor can't handle it, so they limit the 4K to 30 frames per second. And even at 30, it gives it a crop, which means it's not doing as much of the super sampling so that the processor can keep up. The ZVE10 II, again, 8 times the processing speed, can shoot at 4K at 60 frames per second. Kind of makes me wonder if they just disabled 4K 120 on this camera, because it should be able to do that. Lame. A lot of the write-ups I've read about the ZVE10 II say that this basically is useless for taking pictures because it doesn't have a mechanical shutter. I'm guessing those people are just not photographers, or they just repeat what someone said before them, or they just did no testing at all with the camera. I am a photographer, and specifically a motorsports photographer, and yes, it's true, this camera has no mechanical shutter, and in the past, that meant that rolling shutter would be so bad that fast-looking things would look really weird in the picture. But it's the future now. I took this camera to a very fast setting at Virginia International Raceway to shoot some amateur racing for the Champ Car series. Some of these cars are going 170 miles per hour. I don't know how much faster you want things to be moving to prove that this camera can take pictures of fast-moving objects just fine. And I'm not saying there's no rolling shutter because of the lack of the mechanical shutter. Sure there is. I'm just saying that you won't be able to notice the difference. And if you can see the difference and you need that to not be the case, then neither of these cameras are for you. You need to spend a lot more money on a professional camera. Sorry, that was tangential. I have more things to say about the processors. The H.265 file format. Shooting in HAVC-HS as opposed to HAVCS makes file sizes much smaller for the same type of video, same quality of video. Many gigabytes smaller for like a 10-minute video. So that'll essentially slash your storage needs in half if you keep all of your uncut footage like I do. ZVE10 can only shoot in HAVCS, where ZVE10 II can shoot in HAVCS or HAVC-HS. Transfer speed when leaving the SD card in the camera. So the setup for this test, I used the same V90 SD card on both cameras, super fast card, with the same video file and this same Thunderbolt 3 USB-C cable. Copying large video files over to your computer by leaving your SD card in the camera and just plugging a USB-C cable into the side of the camera, there is a pretty big difference between these two. The ZVE10 copied this almost 6 gigabyte file over in 2 minutes and 13 seconds. And the ZVE10 II was able to copy the same file over in just 31 seconds, almost 5 times faster. Of course, you can just pop out the SD card and put it straight into your computer if you have a SD card reader, and then it'll copy in 22 seconds. So this is only a little slower than just putting the card straight into the computer. I guess maybe it's processor intensive to identify a bird. I don't know, but we just got a firmware update for the ZVE10, so it's up to date, and it can still only do people or animals as far as like autofocus tracking recognition, where the ZVE10 II can do animals, people, and birds. So I took this out to my back porch and I sat there until a little bird showed up. You're welcome. I was shooting all the way out at 600 millimeters, and my God, I'll be damned if it didn't lock right onto that tiny little bird's tiny little bird eye and let me rattle off a bunch of perfectly in focus pictures of this thing sitting on my neighbor's fence. That was incredible. Other changes that don't really ring any bells for me, but they are there. When you turn the ZVE10 sideways, all of the menus and things will reorient themselves so you can still read them. Checking a box, I'm sure, for those of you who shoot vertical. Although the menu doesn't. The menu is still sideways, which is pretty funny. They have moved to the new menu layout, and you can use the touchscreen like a touchscreen. So you can actually pick stuff by touching it. On the ZVE10, it has a touchscreen, but for some reason, the only thing you can touch to use it is touching to focus. I can touch to set a focus spot, but I cannot touch a menu. The menus require you to use the scroll wheel and the center button for whatever reason. One thing I like a lot is that you can move the focus box a lot quicker and easier on the new camera. You just push the center button on the dial and it lets you move the focus box. On the ZVE10, you have to go back into the menu, choose focus area, choose which area, and then you can move it once. My workaround for that was assigning this center button to focus area, and then it alleviates a couple of those steps, but you still have to go through a couple of steps before you can move it. The SD card slot was moved from the bottom of the camera on the ZVE10 to the side of the camera on the ZVE10 II. I have said ZVE10 too many times and I keep stuttering trying to say it. Other than all of that, everything else feels about the same with these two. I think the main takeaway is that the final video or the final picture will look about the same with either one of these cameras. If it comes down to money, if it comes down to the price of the two cameras, you can shoot your YouTube videos or your social media content exactly the same same on either one. Neither camera has any stabilization, neither camera has a viewfinder. You've got some potential deal breakers at 4K 60 frames per second, or if you're a birder, or if you really want that HAVC-HS H.265 file format. But mostly, the new ZVE10 II is just a little more convenient to use. And because of the new processor, the eyeball autofocus should grab focus just a little bit quicker, but this one was already so good at that. That said, I'm gonna sell my ZVE10 now and keep my ZVE10 II. I don't need them both. I like it quite a bit. Goodbye.